All right, good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with today's class. All right, so before we begin the class officially, just small sad news. Chester is leaving us. His last day is going to be on Saturday. Yeah, I think he got tired of it. We really appreciate all his input and efforts. He's been an integral part of the instruction staff. I'm sure you guys really appreciate him as well. He's going to be concentrating on his master's degree. I'm sure that's super difficult as well. So his last day is going to be Saturday. All right.
Some more donuts?
Some more donuts. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So on Saturday, we started with constructors, all right, classes and constructors. Quick overview, classes are templates, right? What are they template of? They're basically a template of your objects, right? For example, we saw some different objects such as cats, dogs, horses, and the class for them was animals, all right? So similar to that, we are going to be looking at some examples today as well. All right. Any questions on any confusion on classes, constructors? Does everybody understand the syntax? I know we started with constructors. We kind of dived into classes. And today, we'll do some activities. You can do two ways. You can do just create a constructor. I would prefer and I would suggest create a class and then create a constructor within it, and that's how I would be solving those activities. Okay? Before we start, any questions? Everybody good? All right. So let's start with a basic activity. This will just give a quick warm-up from our Saturday's class. This is activity number 5. So in this one, you're going to create a class programmer. I know it says constructor, but go ahead and create a class called programmer. And then this class is going to have a constructor with looks like 4 properties. Name, position, title, age, and a favorite programming language. Okay? And then this class is going to have one method, which is going to print all the information. Okay, so go ahead. We'll take a few minutes on this one. Go ahead and create this. And the next examples we'll be kind of building on top of this. Okay, so let's see, we'll take 10-15 minutes. We'll do a checkpoint at 10 minutes and see how everybody is doing. And then I'll go ahead and start working on this one. This is activity number 5. Yeah. So how are we doing on this one? Most of the class able to create the class and the constructor, instantiate an object from it. So in object-oriented programming, when you're creating an object using this syntax, is called instantiation. So you will hear the word saying, oh, instantiate an object using this class. But again, it's more from the languages that are actually object-oriented programming. Okay, so let me go ahead and quickly solve this one, and then we'll kind of work on the same example. I'm just going to create a JavaScript class programmer.js. Okay, I'm going to have a class with the same name, programmer. All right, let's go ahead and create a constructor. Let's go ahead and create a constructor function, and this constructor is going to take 4 properties: name, position, age, and language. Okay, set these properties. This dot name from the one that is being passed with the constructor, position, and this dot age is going to be age, and then this dot language. Okay, so this is how you create a constructor and a class. Okay, so this class is going to have one more method, just one method. It's going to be called print info. This is going to output all the properties that are being passed in. So let's go ahead and quickly console log all this information. Let's say console log, use the string literals, console log name. This is going to be this dot name. Okay. Second is position. Position is going to be this dot position. Okay. Age. This dot. Oops, okay. And the last one is language. And this dot language. Okay. All right. Any questions on this, on the construction of the class? Okay, so we have 4 properties, create a constructor, and just one method which actually just goes ahead and prints the info. Okay, this is still not complete because we need to create or instantiate objects from our class. So let's go ahead and create our first object. It's going to be the keyword new, right? Let's scroll up. Okay, so new programmer, and it takes in 4. Let's go ahead and give the parameters. The second is position. Miss double quotes. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Age. Let's give it an age. Let's say favorite program. Okay. So this is how we create an object or instantiate an object from our class. Right, since we have this object, we can call the method that is tied to this object, which is print info, and this should go ahead and console log all of these properties. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, make sure this is working. This, okay, programmer, so node programmer, and goes ahead and outputs everything. Okay, so using the same syntax, you can create more than one objects. All right, and then go ahead and create printing the info. All right, any questions? Does everybody understand the syntax? Constructor functions, a method that belongs to the class, and then you can instantiate an object, and then you can access this method over here. Good. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of modularize this. What I mean is, remember the export module.export that we saw? Because what I like to do is when I'm creating classes, well, I don't create classes in JavaScript, but if I'm creating classes, I like to keep this as an individual file, and then everything else kind of goes in a different file, right? Because in this, it should be only the class definition. All right. So we can use our module.exports that comes with built-in with Node.js and kind of export this class and then create this object somewhere else. Okay. Why? Because we will be adding a lot more code. I'm going to show you a lot more code. For example, we right now the objects are kind of hard coded, so we'll use our inquirer and take an input of all these information and then create objects based on that. Okay, when I talk about inquirer, you can imagine there's going to be a lot more code because I'm going to be calling the library and then I'm going to be asking at least 4 questions, right? And then answers, based on that answers, create this programmer object. Okay, so a lot more code. So I'm going to move that code somewhere else in a different file and then write all that code over there. Okay, but before I do that, let's go ahead and, since this is just 2 lines, so let's see if we can move this code out from this file. Okay, I'm going to just remove this from here. Okay, and if you want to export this any data type, doesn't matter, object, array, string, numbers, in this case the class, the keyword is module.exports. All right, let's make, is it exports or exports? I think exports. Okay, and then what are we trying to export? We're trying to export this class. Okay, now since I have module.exports over here, remember what can I do? I can import this class somewhere else and then start using it. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to create a new JavaScript file. I'm going to call it main.js because that's going to be the starting point of my app. Right, I cannot start over here because I'm exporting, so somebody else has to use this class. Okay, so that's why I created a new JavaScript file. And then how do we import anything that we are trying to export? Same format that you use to export any npm modules. So let's call it programmer. Okay, and then the keyword is, oops, not release, require. Okay, and then let's go ahead and import our modules. So / programmer modules. I think this will work as well. Okay, so I have my programmer class. I'm exporting that class, and in my main.js, I want to import that module. Okay, the same syntax like you use for any npm module. Okay, this time it's a local one. That's why you have a path over here. Okay, before we proceed, let's go ahead and make sure this is working. So we'll create that object that we did and do it over here. Okay, if I import it correctly, there should be no change how I'm instantiating this object, and this should work as it is. Okay, but this time I have to run my main.js because I cannot run this one because it doesn't do anything. It's just exporting, so somebody else has to be importing it, which is this file, and then I'm creating objects using this import. Okay, so let's go ahead and first run this. Make sure this is working. So this is going to be node main.js and exactly the same output. Okay, all I did was I created a class, exported it. Now this is a individual standalone class forever. Okay, now anybody who wants to use this class, you can go ahead and import it in your module and start using it. Okay, now eventually when your code, and we'll see in one of the activities, is going to get bigger and you will have more than one classes. This is how a good practice is to do like this. Okay, create an individual class. Okay, have the same kind of file name, and then export that class and then use it somewhere else. Okay, don't try to create or instantiate objects in the same JavaScript file. Okay, any question? Does everybody understand how I exported and I'm using the same code? Yes.
I noticed instead of using the module.import, like how you're using module.export, you're just using the required.
Yes, that's the way you do it. There's no module.import.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the same thing.
No, this is the way you have to import any module. Depending on if it's an npm or your local, this is how you import any module. Okay. All right. Everybody good? Yes, Chris.
So you have more than one function, maybe 2 or 3 functions you want to import. You have to do it on every,
No. So you see.
Or, I mean, you have to do it as each new variable, or a new variable when you can, or when you require them.
Okay. Now, where do those functions reside? Are they part of the class?
I ended up making a class and then a function to return an object. This is separate from those.
Okay. So
you
if
have 2 things you want to export, I know you can put multiple.
yes, you'll use the object syntax, and then you can export those. Yeah.
And then when you import them, is there a way to do it, like get multiple from one file?
Multiple from one file. Yeah, you will do when you do a require. This will right now it's a class. This will become an object. So if I import, let's suppose I wrap it up as an object. Okay. I can do this, and let's suppose I have something else that I'm trying to import, a variable, or what do you have, a function? Let's suppose the function is called get programmer. I don't know. Programmer. Okay, so you're going to export it like this, and over here, you can access that particular function by saying programmer dot, and then this one, and then if it's a function, we'll call it a function. Okay, but if it's a class, you are not going to do this. Again, you can do anything, but by standard, I'm saying is if it's a class, any functions that you have should be part of the class. Yes, they should be part of like this. Exactly, they should belong to the class. There shouldn't be any method that exists outside this semicolon if we are going with the class one. Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and now include our inquirer over here. How do we include inquirer? And then, so we are going to ask the user some information, the same four properties, and then we are going to create our object. So the first thing is we need to install Inquirer, and then we need to import the Inquirer. So I'm going to use the package JSON that I already have. This is going to install my Inquirer, so I don't have to use Inquirer. Okay. So let's go ahead and first import Inquirer. So Inquirer is equal to required, same syntax, doesn't matter if it's an npm package or your local. Inquirer. Okay. The next is the syntax for Inquirer. You guys remember the syntax is inquirer.prompt and then function. Okay, so inquirer dot prompt and then. Right, this is the stepped out version. All right, so let's go ahead and put it on different lines. And then our prompt is going to take an array of objects. Okay, and these objects are going to become our questions. All right, so at least let's go ahead and create 4 questions. So I'm going to create 4 empty objects, and then over here we're going to ask the questions. So what are the 3 properties that we need from Inquirer? We need the name. Oops. Type. We'll keep all of them simple, so we'll just use the input types. Okay, and then a message that we're going to ask the question. Okay, so these are the 3 things that should get us started with Inquirer. All right, so since these are going to be same, I'm going to copy paste these and then change the name as the message. So all of these are input types. Let's go ahead and see. The first thing is we're trying to ask the name. So say let's store it in a variable called name, and the message is going to be what is your name. Okay, the second is position. So let's go ahead and store it in a variable called position, and we will ask what is your current position. Okay, the next is age, so we'll store it in age and then say what is your age. And the last one is language, so we'll store it in a variable called language, and then what is your favorite okay. Inquirer.prompt takes an array of objects, and this is how we create our questions. All right, so I have 4 questions, so this should be good. Let me go ahead and minimize this, and then let's go ahead and work on the then function. Again, this is an async, that's why you see the then function. All right, what does a then function takes? It takes in a callback function with one parameter. Let's call it answers, and this is going to have all our answers over here. Okay, so based on these answers, we are going to create our objects, or just a single object because it's going to ask the question just once. So let's go ahead and what do we have to do? Let's go ahead and call new programmer, new programmer, and then the first thing is going to be name, so we will pass in answers dot name. Okay, the second is going to be position, so answers dot position. Third is going to be the age, so answers dot age. The last one is your favorite language, so answers dot language. Okay, so this should create our new object called new programmer, and then we can call our print info on this one. So new programmer dot print info, and this time it should go ahead and print all the answers for those questions. Okay, before I run this, any questions? Does everybody understand what's going on? Okay, we're using inquirer, same code. The only thing is this time we are taking user input. All right, we're trying to develop our app. We started with a basic one, just created one class, kind of hard coded our programmer object, but this time we are using user input, and it's going to evolve, kind of become a little bit more trickier. Okay, for now, any question? Does everybody understand how we use the inquirer and how we are creating an object based on the answers? Good. All right. Before we can run this, we need to install. So let's go ahead and install inquirer. So I'm going to run npmi. Since I have a package JSON, it should have inquirer installed in it. Okay. And let's go ahead and run our code. So I'm going to run main.js. Ooh. Oh, I said npm main.js should be node main.js. Okay, so our first question comes up. We're going to answer the same questions. Let's say okay, and then it goes ahead and outputs the same thing. Okay, exact same thing. This assures us that our object is being created, but this time it's being created based on user input. Okay, my questions are over here, an array of objects, and then my answers are here. I'm using the same names, the same variable name that I created over here, name, position, age, and language. Based on that, I'm creating a new object, and I'm importing this class using a required keyword. All right, and this is my class, and I'm using module.export to export this class. All right, questions? Does everybody understand? Good? No? Which part? Okay. This is a lot? Yes. Well, reserve this statement for maybe like 15 minutes and you will see a lot. We're kind of evolving. Okay? This is still not a lot. You'll see a lot in a few minutes. So any clarification can I make? Do you understand the concept, what's going on? Same object. The more important part over here is the module.exports, right? We are exporting the class, and then we are importing. This kind of tells you two things, that we are going to have our local modules, right? And this is how you would import. And then we are going to have some npm modules, and this is how you would import. So both the syntax exactly the same. Okay. The next thing is we are doing user input using inquirer. You could do simple command line also. Does everybody understand that? You can ask the same question as a command line, use process.argv, and then get everything and create the same thing. This is a little bit nicer and easier, looks nice on the UI, but it's the same way. Okay, you are creating a new object based on the user input. Okay. All right, so how many objects am I able to create with this current code? How many objects can I create using this current code? Just one. Just one. Right. One at a time, as in like as soon as I answer all my questions, it prints and my kind of program exits, right? I cannot go back. I have to rerun it. So I can only create one object from it. So let's suppose I want to create multiple. Let's suppose I want to create 5 programmers. How would I go about it? If I want to create 5, I want to ask the same questions 5 times. So this means I want to create 5 new programmers, but I want to ask, if I want to create 5 objects, I have to ask this question 5 times, right? Because the first one is going to create one object, The second question is going to answer, and you're going to create a second object, then third, then fourth, then fifth. So what do I have to do if I want to create 5 objects?
Put it all in a for loop.
Put it all in a for loop. Does everybody see that? Right? Because it's the repetition. I'm asking the same question again and again, so I can put this in a for loop. So let's go ahead and put this in a for loop and ask the same question multiple times. So this is my inquirer, so I'm going to put this in my for loop. Okay, let's call it I. Let's hard code this and we'll just do it 5 times. Okay. Remove this. I'm going to move this parentheses at the end so that everything comes under my for loop. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this now. So I created a for loop for 5. Okay, it will run 5 times. It should ask me the question 5 times, and I should be able to create 5 different objects. So let's go ahead and open this up. Node main. Oh, okay. So it asked me 5 questions at the same time. Okay. Oh wow. Okay. Well, I did create 5 objects though, but in a weird way.
You guys can technically.
You can do what?
Technically.
Technically did it. So Chris is adamant that his solution is good and it's working. So what is going on? Any explanation? What happened? Why do I see the same question? I mean, I want to see the same question, but it's kind of weird. It asks me the same question 5 times at the same instant. And then it takes my input and creates, basically answers all my 5 questions with the same input, right? And then it's creating 5 different objects. I can see that because it's looping through but it's creating the same one. So what is going on? Any? Oh, thank you, Raymond. It is async. How do you tell it is async? Right. But looking at the code, if there's a then function, this means that this is async.
Oh.
Right? What does Raymond remember from the Ajax call? This is async. And again, why? Because there's a then function. That this should tell you this prompt method over here is async. What does it mean? That it's not going to wait for the for loop to complete. So it goes over here, asks the question, doesn't wait for this. Why? Because this is async. Okay, it's going to go to the next statement, which is the next loop. So it comes back over here, asks the same question, the prompt one, then goes back here again and again and again. When it's done with the first one, then it will go ahead and call this function. And the reason is it's async. It's not waiting for the object to be created. So let's try it one more time. If I run this, okay, so the for loop actually ran 5 times without actually waiting for me to actually answer the question. Okay, what I wanted to do is it asks me the first question, then waits for me, then asks me the second question, then third, then fourth question, creates an object, then comes back again, and then asks me the 5 questions again. Okay, but since this is async, it's kind of behaving in a weird way. It's not waiting for me for the next question to come up. Okay, so the for loop is not going to work over here. Any other suggestions? Again, what am I trying to do? I want to create different programmers, but what I want is that I get asked these 5 questions. Oops. Okay, for one object. When I'm done, then it asks me these same questions again and again and again. Let's suppose 5 times.
gonna be another npm package?
No, you don't need an npm package. You can do it over here. It's just the logic is a little bit not correct.
I think maybe you create the new programmer first and you do like a for each to reassign each value somehow.
So let's go ahead and remove this. Okay. Tell me again. So you create a programmer, and then
And then you ask
again.
do the inquirer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you create the programmer first.
Yes.
And then do the inquirer.
It's in the right direction. So what Chris is saying is, you ask the question, and then you create the programmer, which we are doing. We're going to ask the question. It creates one, and then basically ask the same questions again, right? Maybe. Okay. So just like in Ajax call, what is the point that we are sure that the programmer is created, like 100%, no matter if it is async or not? What line of code are we sure is going to get executed once we ask those questions? This thing, right? Once the then function says, if the next question or anything that is dependent on this part, right, everything has to come either inside it or after it, right? But it has to be inside this function, then function. And the reason is, since this is an async function, I cannot, JavaScript cannot assure us that it's going to ask the question again and again and again unless this is complete. So what is the situation? I want to ask the same question again when I'm done with this part. When I've created one programmer, right, then I want JavaScript to ask me the same set of questions again, right? When that programmer is created, then I want JavaScript to ask me the same set of questions again, and then again, then again. But the only condition is once I'm done with these lines of code. Okay, so one more time. So I want to ask 4 questions, right? These are the questions that I'm going to ask. All right. Now I want to ask those questions for every programmer. Let's suppose I'm going to create 5 programmers. Okay. So I want the set of those questions, which are 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to ask these 4 questions. And then once I have answered all those 4, I want to go ahead and create programmer number 1. Okay? And then I want JavaScript to come back to these questions and ask me those questions again. And then create a second object. Okay? And then a third, then a fourth. And right now we have 5. So it will go ahead and create 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? But the dependency is that once I'm done with my questions, once it is created, I want to ask the same questions again. So basically, once I'm done with this, I want to call this prompt again so that it asks me the same questions again. Prompt is a method, yes. You won't be able to call the prompt again, but you can call this whole thing again and again. For example, basically I want to call prompt again. And how would I call prompt again? After it's been created, I would say inquirer.prompt.then. Okay? Will this work? So what is happening? So I create an object and then I call the prompt again. But since I'm calling this again, I have to ask the same set of questions. So I have to copy the whole thing, right, and put it over here. And then in my then function, similar to over here, I'm going to create my second one. Basically something like this. Okay, and then in my then function, basically I'm doing the exact same thing again. So let's say function answers okay. So let's see what happens. So inquirer comes in, it's asked me those 4 questions. Once I have answered, it's going to create a new one. Okay, and then once it is done, it's going to ask the same set of questions. Okay, why? Because I need more than one programmer. It's going to ask me again, and then once this is done, it's going to go ahead and create a second programmer. Now, if I want to do a third programmer, what do I have to do? Same thing. So let's keep going. No, of course not. Yeah, I hope not. But I'm showing you that this is, you have to do this again and again and again for however many times you're trying to create. So if you're doing it 5 times, you have to keep doing this. But this is the solution. Do you guys see that why this is a solution? Again, because this is an async function. Anything that is dependent on the previous part to be completed, you have to put it in the then function. There's no place else you can put it. Now my next set of questions is dependent that I'm done with the first set of questions. I've created an object, and then it goes ahead and creates a second object. So I have to eventually put it in my then function. Okay, my third is dependent on once this is completed, so I have to put this over here again. My fourth is again, and we keep going on and on and on. Yes, you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, instead of repeating yourself, could you just create a separate function?
Oh, yes, yes. So that's what I was trying to get to. You see, so Michael is saying we create a separate function and keep calling that function, and that's what you have to do. Okay, so let's try that solution. Let's see how that looks like now. So let's go ahead and delete all of this, and we'll create a function and then call that function. This is part of this. I hope I'm deleting the right thing. Okay. Okay. So what Michael is saying, instead of repeating, if you want to remove any repeatable code, you use a function. So let's go ahead and create a function and then keep calling that function. Okay. I'm going to call that function ask question. So let's go ahead and wrap this whole thing inside a function. So function ask question. Okay, and then we're going to move all of this inside our function here, format it. Let's make sure this looks good. Okay. All right, so now I have a function. Okay. Since I want to call this function the first time, so let's go ahead and call this function over here. So how many times this function is going to run? 1. Does everybody see it's going to run only once? All right, because this is a definition and I'm calling the function over here. It goes here, asks me the question, creates it, and ends. Okay, but I want to keep calling this function more than once. Let's suppose 5 times. So what do I have to do? How do I call this function? Michael, do you know how do I keep calling this function? Right now it's been called once. If I want to call it again for the second one, where do I have to call this function?
Within the response of that.
Right, which is? the then function.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to call all right, let's see what's happening. Definition, I call the function the first time, it goes over here, asks me the questions, comes here, creates an object, and then calls itself again. Comes over here, asks the questions. All right. Once these questions are completed, goes ahead, creates a programmer, prints the info, comes here, and then calls itself again. All right. Then comes here, asks the question, creates it, calls itself again, and again, and again, and again. It's not going to stop, right? But it's the right approach. This is what we want. The only thing is we are missing a exit condition, right? And the condition is I want to create 5 programmers. All right, so let's keep a count. As soon as we have 5 programmers, we can go ahead and stop calling this function. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a variable count. Okay, and then we will keep incrementing this count for 5 times. So as soon as we print the info, so let's go ahead and increase our count, and then let's add a check over here and say if my count is less than 5, keep asking this question. And where does this end after this? So I'm going to move this parentheses over here. Okay, once this is done, let's go ahead and say console log all programmers have been instantiated. Okay, now what happens? Definition, the first time it gets called, comes over here, count is 0, calls this function, goes in my then function, increments the count, okay, and then asks the question again. All right, comes back here, count is 1, should go in, increment the count, and then ask again. Count is 2, 3, 4. When it increments to 5, it exits out over here, prints our console log statement, and ends the program. Okay, let's run this before we start asking questions. Maybe this, hopefully this doesn't give me any errors. You know what, 5 is too much. Let's do 3. Node main. Okay, it's kind of looping through, but it's asking me only once. So let's say name, age. Okay, so it creates the first object, prints it out, and then goes on to the next one because I'm trying to create 3, right? Okay. Steve is old school. All right. So one more. All right. Let's see. Okay. So it ran 3 times, completed, count has been done, and then it prints out our else statement. So instead of the for loop, since this is an async, what do we have to do? We cannot use a for loop. Instead, we wrap it around a function and then call the same function over and over again. Okay? Now this calling a function itself, this concept is called recursion. Recursion. Because it's recurring. Recursion. It's a pretty advanced concept, okay? And it is very easy to mess it up because you see there's a chance of getting into the infinite loop. If your exit condition is incorrect, this program is going to run forever and ever until your laptop memory runs out. Or it's not laptop memory, it's the memory allocated to this program runs out. I think it's like 4 MB or something. So once the memory runs out, you will be stuck in an infinite loop, right? Again, why? Because this function calls itself and then itself, then itself. Unless this exit condition is correct, it's going to keep calling itself. Okay? Again, this question, the concept when you call a function again and again within itself, it's called recursion. All right? Same function, and within the function, you're calling itself. All right? This is called recursion. All right. Questions? Go ahead. Can't be this easy. It took me a while to understand recursion. What is it? Again, the part if you're using inquirer, this is the only solution how you can solve this issue. Okay? Remember, if you're using a for loop, it's not going to work. Why? Because this is an async method. The prompt is an async method. It's not going to wait for your for loop to complete. All right? So this is using recursion is the only way to kind of make new objects by user input. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, let's make it even more complicated. All right, so now do I have access to this object outside the then function? Can I access this object outside my then function? No, no, right? Why? Because this is a LED, it's over here, creates it, and it's done. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to print the info after I have captured everything, right? I cannot move this into this over here in my else. And why I cannot do it? Because this variable is not accessible outside this thing. Okay. One of the ways you can do is you can create an array of every object, like a global array, and then print that array in this one. For example, let's go ahead and create let programmer array. Okay, this is going to be an array of objects of type programmer. So every time a programmer is added, I'm going to remove this print info because I don't want it printing over here. I'm going to say programmer array dot push new programmer. Okay, so every time this function gets called, is going to create, is going to add that new object in this array. Okay, since this array is global, I can access it over here. Once this all is done, we can write a for loop or a for each, and then say programmer array dot length, and then I can call the print info method, and this time it should go ahead and print. Let's go ahead and remove this. Let's add dashes so we can see and output all of our programmers. So this time I can ask all the questions, and then it's going to print in the end. Let's see. Okay. Alright, so that's one. So you see it changed, and it's asking me the second one without actually printing it out. Alright. Hold on, let me fix. Let me add some dash over here so that we can see where do I want to add. Let's add here. Let's try this again. Okay. All right. So this tells you it's asking me the second question without actually printing because I removed the print function. I'm saying once I have all the input, that's when I'm going to go ahead and print. Okay. Oh, okay. No worries. Okay, and then it goes ahead and prints everything. Again, why? Because I removed the print info over here. I'm creating an array, right? Simple array. I'm adding each object to this array, which is global. And then once the questions have been asked for 3 objects, then I go ahead and loop through my array. This is an array of these programmer objects. So each one should have access to all the methods and properties. So that's why I'm calling print info on each object. Okay. This is how you would if you are expecting multiple inputs or multiple questions for multiple people or objects. This is how you would do it. Save it in an array and then use it over here. All right, questions? Is it already done? It's not even halfway through the class. All right, so let's do one thing. Let's take a break. We'll come back at 7:50. All right, and then we'll do another exercise, and we'll do an exercise kind of similar to this one, and then this will give you some practice how to use it. Okay. All right, 7:50.
Guys, it's going pretty well. I'm not sure. We just had an announcement from the city of Boca that there is a 2019 Hyundai Elantra. It's red. If it's anybody's car, they are going to tow it. So I don't think anybody would use their car, but just so you know, in case it's anybody's car, they're going to tow it within the week. So yeah, just so you know.
Yes. All right,
Thank you for
have a good
letting
night.
me stop by.
Of course.
If you need anything, let me know.
Okay.
If anything special is coming up, let me know.
All right, sounds
Have
good.
a
Have a
good
good
night.
night, you too. Yes.
I feel like we're probably gonna go over it, but
Okay.
what is that prototype for? Because when we were going through, I was actually looking at one of the other activities or demonstrations or whatever. But it had a prototype on there.
Right. So remember, I was saying that if you have let's suppose we'll use the same example. We have the programmer class, right? Programmer, right? If you want to add a new property to an object, suppose you created a programmer object, right? Like this, new programmer, and then all the properties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want to add a property just to this object, you would say Tony dot is present as what's okay. Now, if you want to add the same this property does not exist over here.
Yep.
Right. Now, if you want to add a property to this object, this is how it would work. If you have a new object called Steve, it's not going to have the is present property, right? Why? Because this is tied to this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want this property to be tied to every programmer, you would say programmer dot prototype dot is present. So that's how you would use this one.
So why would you want to use that instead of just typing it in, like to?
Yeah, I know, but this is why. I mean,
Oh.
usually you would put it over here, but this option is there. If for some reason, what happens is if I have this class like this, right, separated out,
Mm-hmm.
right, and somebody else created this class, right, you don't want to modify this. For some reason, it's going to break something else, right? But you need a property. So what you are going to do is you're going to do it in your file, and then you are going to say, oh, programmer.prototype, and add a property in your file because you don't want to modify this one. Somebody else created it. A lot of people are using. If you change this, something is going to happen or break. So you don't want to take that risk. So you will use this in your code and do it.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how you use this one.
Thank you.
Okay. Mhm. Zombie game? What is the zombie game?
That was the challenge from the last week.
Okay. What do you have to do? I haven't I've seen it. What does it do?
It's like the RPG, but it's the same thing that we
This
have
thing?
to do the damage, but it was kind of in a mix of what we studied last week and now.
For zombie game, you have to use constructors?
Not really, but
Oh.
it's just the same logic that with the dam function,
Okay.
that's the problem. So I was
So
like going crazy with the while loop and for loop.
yeah,
and
that's the
for
problem. You cannot use the while or the for loop, and this is the only solution for it. Again, the reason is because these are your inquirer method is an async method, just like your ajax method. Okay, so when you're calling your this prompt over here, this is an async method. That's the so you cannot use a for loop, you cannot use a while loop, anything. Those are not going to work. This is the recursion is the only solution. Again, why? Because you want to ask this question and then wait for the answer, and then ask the question again, and then ask the question again. If you put a for loop, you saw what happened.
I did that.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
And it crashed.
Yeah, this is the only solution. So let's do this. We'll do an activity right now, and then let's on Thursday in our office hours, I can solve the zombie challenge. Okay. All right. We'll try to do the zombie challenge with the constructors and classes. I know it's not required, but since we're doing it, so we will solve it in this example. But I think the next activity that you will work on will kind of help you understand this, and you should be able to do the zombie challenge if you use the classes one. We'll do it on Thursday.
And the homework this week is optional.
You already saw that? Yeah.
I know, I saw that and I was like,
Yeah.
gonna tell us.
What? No, I was going to tell you that it's optional on
No,
Thursday.
I
Oh,
said I was thinking of what you were gonna tell us.
oh,
So,
like do it.
like, suggest that we do it regardless.
Yeah, that's what I tell you. But my duty is to tell it's optional, and I think like only like 2 people turn in. But
Can you
yes.
show the then function?
Yeah.
In the other one?
Okay.
Like, well, free week. Oh, I forgot. You know, you're done. So you're going to- Yeah.
There's some pretty stuff.
You can do this on that too.
I'm gonna install those.
That one's like. Draw out each one.
Okay, now open up the LC.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
You're looping through the array and printing that info.
Okay. This is.
Oh, this is actually from YC's.
Oh,
The
okay.
YC?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. I'm more used to Genghis Grill, but this was my first time to YC.
Yeah.
It was okay.
I worked there for like one day, like
This one
10
day.
years ago or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
Yeah,
You
I
were
didn't-
the grill master.
I didn't come back.
Let me come back. Yeah, this is like a. There's a line over there. All right. Let's take a deep breath, calm down, and let's try the next activity. Okay. Now this activity, let me open this, and once I go through the activity, I'll bring this up so that you guys can see this as a reference. This is going to be activity number eight. And this is called Team Manager. Okay. All right. So let me quickly go over the README because it kind of looks scary. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, this part, once all of the players have been created, print the stats. Okay, everything that you see on the screen, this is priority. Okay, try to see if you can complete. If you're able to complete this, you have basically understood the lesson that we just did, the activities just we did. Okay, everything after this, once all the players have been created, print the stats, is bonus. Okay, only attempt if you are comfortable over here, you are done with this, you understand what's going on, right? Just like my previous example, then only go ahead and start with this. This is, again, it's not as complicated. The thing is, we started with something a little bit more challenging, so this thing looks scary. But if you go through it, once you're relaxed and once you are fine, you will see it's using some of the concepts that we have already studied, basically using math.random and everything. Okay, but what I'm suggesting is the priority is this thing. Okay, why? Because this section tells you you have to create a class. All right, you are going to call it player, right? You're going to create a constructor within that class, just like a programmer. You're going to create properties, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 properties. Okay, and then it has for 3 methods of functions: good game, bad game, print, stats. Okay, create these 3 functions, 4 properties, 3 functions. Okay, and then once you are done with it, you're going to use inquirer, just like my previous example, and then create 3 players. Okay, once you are done with this, create 3 players and then print their stats. Once you are at this point, you're comfortable, you understand what's happening, how do you do this, then go ahead and look at the bottom one. But right now, the more important part is that you are able to complete this part until here. Okay, if you are done with this, then look at the next one. Again, in this class, I'm going to try to solve in the end until over here. Again, I'm going to leave that. For example, on Thursday, Irina was suggesting, so I'm going to do the zombie challenge. I'm going to solve it in office hours. At a later point, if you guys go ahead and attend this activity and you have questions about this, I'm going to come back and redo this in office hours. But again, the more important part is this. Why? Because this will help us understand creating the classes, constructor, methods, using inquirer to create objects, any number of objects. In this case, we're creating 3. Okay, does everybody understand? Okay, again, let me close this and open my activity which I solved so that you guys can have a reference, and let me quickly talk about that as well. This was programmers, right? Yeah. Again, I would suggest kind of follow the same route. Create your class as a separate file, export it, and then create a main.js, and then import that class over here, and then go ahead and solve this thing. Okay. Again, once I post the solution, you will see that that's not how the solution is, but this is a better way to do it. That's why I'm suggesting you guys kind of follow this pattern. Okay, eventually the later activity this will bring up, but I want you guys to kind of solve this activity kind of similar way. Okay, all right, I'm going to leave this over here. So I'm going to close this prompt, you guys understand. I'm going to open the then function. It's going to be kind of similar thing. Okay, let me see if I can zoom out a bit. It's kind of small, but you can look at the TVs. Okay, so I'm going to leave it. It's kind of following the same until the print stats. It's the same same design pattern that I have solved it. Okay. Any questions on that activity? All right. So here's what we'll do. I'll give you 30 minutes. All right. 8:30. Let's see how we get there. We'll try to solve that in 30 minutes. Okay. Again, I want you guys to at least solve that until that print stats part. Again, why? Because we're going to cover this part and you will see how this is working. Right? So we'll do this until 8:30 before we start on the next one. Yes. What is it? Yeah. Yeah. The activity says constructor, but again, that's what I was saying. Start with a class one. That's a better way to do it. If you're using constructor, might as well use it. Shouldn't say correctly, but so try to solve it in the same way.
for the just creating the players, right?
Yeah, just creating 2 players and printing. Good job.
Or 3, 1 starter or 2 starters, 1 starter.
Oh, 3 players. Yeah.
You could have a function inside of the constructor.
No, it has to be outside. If you're using the class syntax, it has to be outside.
Put these functions inside.
No, the functions go outside. Just as you did in the programmer, right? Should be outside
Put the functions inside.
class.
Import that to this.
Functions are inside the class.
Yeah, I have that.
But they are not inside the constructor. They are outside the constructor, but inside the class. And the only thing you're exporting is the class.
I get a declaration or unexpected token.
Right. There's no. You see over here. There's no keyword function. There's no function.
Oh.
Just like this.
Oh, okay.
So a construct class constructor, no name, and then whatever function you're calling, just like this.
Got it. Thank you.
So you physical find
It's up to you now. If you want, if you don't want to write any numbers, then you can. So if it always one,
right here.
but that's
Yeah, so, okay, do control C.
oh, you're saying this.
Yeah, the declaration.
But you cannot have that variable. It's not part of your class.
So this is that's what it
It's not part of your class. Because the random number from the main JS. What we're using this class when
it's not recorded. So you get right, exactly. So now that you created this, anyone else can come in and make it
oh yeah.
Well, actually, yeah. Never mind. The deep
and now any
Oh yeah, the deep is did. Yeah,
like
yeah,
if
so
you
there.
would add access or any of those packages, now that you created this, it will update. So you don't ever have to run and it's gonna then we'll add it to there as well. And then that's the
Oh yeah, that's the 0 4. This is
yes, and then the package lock.
Yeah.
So because it's a lock, it's like locked, doesn't get that building is massive, and then no modules will not be 0.
Yes, because this is 1 and 2 times 1.
I believe that's the default for the beginning. So this is 0, like if there's a select. It's got the modules. It's got a little bit like so it's trying to appease people who come from like a tree space. Language, even though it's not really. So yeah,
So do we need a few more minutes to complete the print stats? Close.
A little more.
Or giving up? So it's very similar to exactly like this, at least until the print stats one.
And it's saying get like doing the main.
Yeah, the main one. Until the print stats. The four complete the print stats and then you can complete the other two. The good game and bad game, they are also pretty straightforward until then. So how many are done with the non-bonus part? You're able to, oh, you're done. Okay. You're done. Excellent. Who else? Michael, I think you're done, right? Until the print stats?
I declared the function, but I didn't
Okay.
call it on it in the other file.
Okay.
Doesn't want to print my numbers.
Oh.
It's not going to erase it.
It's what?
Numbers.
giving us the value of undefined guys.
Because so what's
Undefined that.
Yeah, so
yeah, so the idea here, so you're
Okay.
pushing every time it goes through,
So
because
what
again,
do
you
you
want
like?
it to
So you're using the
constructor five. I mean, this way you're safe, because otherwise, when it's only accessible, you could go back and make them. This way you're storing.
I stumbled so said that
Oh,
it keeps.
I know,
yeah, the if condition would be actually on the top.
Oh, is that before the thing?
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay,
It's a little, yeah,
that's what
Yeah.
I did it. But do you know why it's still giving us that undefined protected? So, so yeah,
you wanna compromise?
Only this first one.
Third person? Oh, I know. Oh, wait. Yes.
Control Z back to this.
But then it's always, this doesn't, you're only calling this function once. And you're passing a number, so this is always, this is never going to be false, right?
That works. Because, at the end of the day, this minus is one.
This one. No, I just brought it back.
Yes. Yes. Oh. Well.
Just, I got it.
Yeah. Oh, this is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you have to do is you just convert the whole else to the button. Yeah.
So that's,
So.
that's where it gets.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick. Click on that, beginning of the array. Square bracket.
Just format it so that.
Where you have.
So I'm gonna put the.
Click on the
So everything your count goes over here, and then it ends. The whole encoder thing is inside your if, and then you have your else.
Yeah, it's an array.
So
Square bracket there, objects.
this whole thing is over here, and then else.
You got the beginning square bracket. I don't think you're good.
I didn't have that beginning square bracket. I don't care.
I thought there was a square bracket.
Saw something.
Yeah, serious.
No, I don't wanna see it.
What?
Did it work?
Uh,
So that's just, no.
let's see.
So maybe I should leave it in Terry. Other.
Just like that, so that voice, that was just, that creepy, I was saying,
Did it over?
She wants a t-shirt. It says
Let me just.
All right. Any questions on the previous activity until the print stats? It's similar to this one. Let's see. Let me show you what I have. I just did the basic one. So let me see how I solved. This is the team manager. All right. So I just did the not the bonus part. Same thing. You have your player. Let me remove these. Okay, so you have your player just like the programmer. For properties, methods, print stats, the console logs everything. Okay, any questions on this? Well, I can come back to good game and bad game, but this is the easier one first. Similar to the programmer, create the properties, console log them, and then in my main.js, I have my create player function, right? And then I'm calling it the first time, and then I'm using the recursive methodology in my if statement. After I ask the questions, I just call the same function again and again. Okay, and this time instead of the count, if you're using the count as 3, that's also fine. The short way would be you can just use the length of the array if you're pushing it to an array. Remember, I was pushing it to an array so I can access it in my else statement. So you can also use the length of the array, that as soon as the length of the array it has 3 elements or 3 players added, you can exit out, or you can use the count method. But with the count, you will have to do a count plus plus somewhere over here. Okay, if you're using the array one, then it automatically updates the length, so you don't have to keep a count of it. That's the only difference. Okay, because I'm pushing it to an array just like my programmer, and then just print the stats. Okay, it is exactly the same as the programmer one until over here, until they're printing the stats. Okay, the next two were the good game and the bad game. I saw most of the people kind of figure it out. Use the coin flip, the random number between 0 and 1, and you can increase the offense, otherwise increase the defense if it's a bad game. Exactly same thing, and reduce the number. Okay, again, the more important is the print stats, and then you're able to create the function and then call it recursively, and then at least print the stats. Okay, any questions on this part? No questions? Good. Okay, so let's take a look at something else. So we've been dealing with just one class, right? Or one constructor function, whichever way you're using. Now, there can be, of course, when you're doing a bigger project, you will have more than one classes, right? Or more than one constructor functions, okay? There might be a case where your one class depends on some other class, okay? For example, the example that I'm going to be coding is, I'm going to use we did a team manager, I'm going to do a movie manager, okay? I'm going to create a kind of similar app. We'll call it movie manager. Okay, it's going to have some information about the movie. Okay, we're going to create some movie objects, and I'm going to add some information to that object, right? Kind of similar to this. The only difference is this movie is going to have cast members among other information. Okay, could be title, year, and a few more things. Okay, the thing over here is the first one is more important. A cast. A cast could be an array of strings. Okay, which has some more details about the actors. Okay. But what we are going to do is we are going to create a separate class for cast members. And the reason is each cast can have its own properties. For example, name, first name, last name. Class, I'm going to create a cast member like a separate class, and then I'm going to use that inside my movie class. Right? What I'm trying to show you is that you can have another class being called in a different class as well, which is part of it. Okay, again, the cast member class that I'm going to create is part of the movie class. Okay, it cannot exist or it's not going to be used on its own. When you're creating or when you're reading a movie, you're going to have a property called cast, which is going to be another class. Okay, let me put this in an order so that you guys can actually see what I'm talking about. So we're going to create, first of all, we'll start with creating two classes. Let's call this movie manager. So I'm going to create a movie manager. Okay. And then let's go ahead and create our class. So we'll have our main JS file. Okay. And then we will have our movie.js, which will have the movie class. And then I'm going to add another class over here called cast. Let's call it cast. Okay, so we've been looking at example for just one class. Now we're looking at two, and the cast class is going to be used inside my movie. Okay, so let's first go ahead and code our cast class. Okay, so I'm going to have, let's see what, we'll add some properties to our cast members. We'll do name, title, or something, or gender. So let's go ahead and create our class cast. Okay, and then we'll have our constructor function. Okay, we'll pass in few values. Let's say name, gender, let's say role. Okay, set these to name, gender, and then role. Okay, simple constructor takes in these three properties. Let's go ahead and print information. Let's call it print profile, similar to our previous examples, and then we will just go ahead and console log this information. We'll say name. All right, and then let's say gender. This gender, and then we'll put the role as well. Okay, just a cast one. Nothing different from what we have seen. All right, so let's go ahead and export this so that we can use it in our different class. So module.exports cast. All right, so that's my cast class. All right, let's go ahead and create our movie class now. So we're going to have our class movie. Okay, let's go ahead and create our constructor. Let's say movie name. Let's give it a genre. Budget. Okay, let's go ahead and complete this. Movie name, genre, and let's say budget. Okay. Now I'm going to add cast members to this class as well. Okay. So I'm going to say this dot cast is equal to an empty array. I'm not passing it in the constructor. Okay. If I'm not passing it in a constructor, we need a separate method that's going to go ahead and add it to our cast members. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a function called add cast members. Okay, I'll do cast members. Okay, for now it's just a function in this class. All right, now to add a cast member we need name, gender, and role. So let's go ahead and ask that information in this name, gender, role. Okay, again at this point it's just a function that is taking some information in. All right, any questions so far? So I created a cast member class, simple 3 properties, print profile, this outputs everything. A movie class which has 1, 2, 3 properties, and there's a cast one also, and we'll come back to it. And then it just adds these information in the constructor. Okay. All right. Now in the movie class, I have a method called add cast member. It takes in 3 parameters: name, gender, and role, which is similar to what my cast class is. Okay, so now if I want to create a object of cast class, okay, in this class over here, what do I have to do? What's the first thing I need to do if I want to create an object of this class? Yes, good, thank you, excellent. So the first thing I need to do is import this. So import cast. Excellent. Require. How come require doesn't show up? /cast. Okay. And then if I want to create an object, I can say let cast is equal to new cast, and it shows up over here. What am I saving? I'm saving name, which comes in my function, right? These same values over here, gender, and then role. Okay, so this will create an object, a new object, and then if I want to add this object to my cast array, let's call it casts. Okay, what do I have to do? Same thing that we did in the programmers and the other activity. You will say casts dot push this new object that we have created. Okay, this is an example that I have more than one classes. I'm making use of the other class in a different class. Okay, my cast member class, right, is being used over here. It's part of the movies. Okay, it's an array which is going to have cast objects. Okay, and then I created a method over here which takes in 3 parameters and 3 arguments you will pass in. Based on this, it's going to create an object. Oops. Okay, it's creating a new cast object and then adding it to this array. So far so good? No? Okay, ask me a question. What's the confusing word? Too many classes? Yes.
Do the parameters have to be the same for the add class method and the object and for the class, the new class?
These names? These
The
things?
parameters, yeah.
No, you can name. You can put anything. You can say N, G, R, but these two should match, right? Lines number 11 and 12 should match. So I should say N, then G, then R. Because somebody is going to, from my other class, I'm going to call this method and pass in these three arguments. And the same one, I'm creating an object based on that. So these two should match, but you can name it anything you want.
What if you only wanted to take it to a different class? Could you do that? Or would it have to match exactly?
You can do that. So example, you can skip the roll one, but then when you do a print over here, it's going to say null or undefined. Yeah, you can totally do it. JavaScript will totally be fine with it. Any other language, this will be an error, but in this case, it's not an error. And the reason is because my constructor is expecting 3 arguments, 1, 2, and 3. So it has to be 3. Again, JavaScript doesn't care, so it will just skip this one. Okay, so I have 2 classes. Now my cast class is part of my movies. Okay, I have an array of cast, which is an array of this object. Okay, let's go ahead and export this. So I'm going to say module dot exports is equal to movie. Again, at this point, none of this work. Why? Because both of them are being exported, right? I'm not calling, I'm not creating anything yet. Okay, that's where our main.js comes in, and in main.js, I'm going to create a object for movies. Okay, so if I go back here, open my main.js, let's see. Now, I definitely need the movie, import the movie class. Okay, do I need to import the cast one as well? No, yes. What is it? Oh, yes. Because it's part of the movie one. And I'm not actually using that. Again, why? Because I'm going to call this method, right? And I'm going to pass these 3 things. From my main.js, I have no idea what it does and I don't care, right? All I care is that I need to call import this and then call this function. Basically create a constructor, call this constructor, and then call this function. And supposedly behind the scene, it's going to add a cast to it. But over here at this point, I don't need anything related to cast. Okay? Yes, you had a question. You can what? Yeah, well, technically, if you look at it, it's not adding that class. It's adding this. It's giving you ability of a function. It's not actually adding the class. You still cannot access that class. Okay. Again, it's not part of this. You know, you see what am I exporting? I'm exporting movie, which means everything from line number 3 to 16. Okay. So my line 3 to 16, I'm able to access the constructor. I'm able to access this method. Now within this method, it does creation of an object and everything, but outside movie, I don't care. I don't know what's going on. That's why. I still cannot access the cast over here because again, I'm just exporting this part. Yes.
If you wanted to access the class, you just use a second module.export.
So you cannot have 2 module.export. It has to be only one. Again, this is an object, so you would put an object and import the second class. So you would do just like what Chris was asking in the beginning. You would say movie and then you can say cast as well. So this way you will have, now you are importing this one, and a variable cast, which is actually this one. Kind of gets complicated, but that's how you would do it. It didn't. Yeah, it should. Oh, like two module dot export. Huh. I wonder if the second one is getting overridden. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our movie object. So you will say let's create a movie, new movie. Again, it only takes 4. It's not taking the cast, right? So let's go ahead and say movie name. Let's say action. Let's something like this. Okay, so you created a movie. Now, I've only created the object for the movie. It still doesn't have the cast over here. Okay, now why doesn't it have the cast? Because there's a function that I need to call on this new object. So I have to say matrix dot, and you will see this. Okay, and then you will pass in some information here. Okay, so let's see, what do we have to pass. Let me get some names. So my first thing is name. Say name, and then row. Let's say this. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and create a new object. Again, we know it because we coded it out, but from just looking at the main file, it's just adding a cast member to this object. Okay, behind the scenes, there's a cast array, this one, and that's getting kind of filled up. Okay, let's go ahead and add one more so that you can see it's actually an array. Add cast member. I don't know if I spelled this correctly. Say gender. Okay, so I have one movie with 2 members. Let's go back and see if we can output this. So let's say let's see. So I have cast. Let's see if we can access this. If we say for, and then I'm going to say matrix dot cast dot length, and let's just go ahead and console log matrix cast, and then I. So it should go ahead and output 2 cast members. Okay, again, how am I able to access this variable? If you go back to your movie, in the constructor, I have 3 properties, and then there's an array as well. So I can access all of them from my main.js, right? Just like you can say matrix dot genre, movie name, or budget, any one of these, so you can access any one of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this and see if it actually outputs. Name. And then actually goes like in console logs, and you see this cast over here. This is showing because this is an object, so it's outputting everything that belongs, everything that is part of that object. So let's suppose if I wanted to access the name, just like you would parse a JSON, right? This is also a JavaScript object, so you would say dot name, and this time it's only going to output the names. Okay, and then you have all the properties that are part of it. So let me go back and just put this. Okay, so the point for this activity is that you can have more than one classes, and you're going to have more than one classes. Some of the classes would be part of a parent class. Oh, let's not say a parent class because that's a totally different thing. Some of the classes will be part of another class. For example, the top class is movie, and within the movie there's another class involved which is called cast. Okay, you would have a separate declaration, separate definition for this class, and then you can go ahead and use this in this class. Okay, and all you need is the same thing required: import that variable, import that class, and then create new objects and add it over here. Okay, from your main you don't need the cast one. Again, why? Because cast is kind of hidden from you. It's inside this movie class. Okay, and the only thing that has been exposed from the movie class is this method over here, which will go ahead and add create new objects from that class, which is this one. It is going to go ahead and create a new object, add it to this array. You have access to this array, and then you can go ahead and loop through and see what the cast is. Okay, so this is not okay. When it comes to JavaScript, it's super uncommon. Like, again, nobody actually uses the class I was saying, but again, in other languages, this is quite common that you will have classes within classes, subclasses, some other classes talking to different classes, but this is how you would do it. Okay, I know it's confusing, I get it, but this let's do this. Let's do the next activity. It's kind of similar to this one, and I'm going to leave this over here so that you guys can see and kind of follow along. Let me first open that activity. So you are going to create a classroom and students. So now you are going to have two classes. One is going to be student, and one is going to be class. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so create two separate classes. One is called student. It's going to have three properties. Okay, the second class is going to be classroom, which is going to have these properties and an array of students, kind of similar to that. So movies and cast, in this case it's classroom and students. Okay, and then just go ahead and print the students. So you're going to create a function over here just like I created over here. This is activity number 10. So let me go back over here. I'm going to open the example that I just solved so that you guys can use that as so in this case I have movie and cast. Okay, so for you guys, you're going to create a classroom. This is going to be a student. Okay, now in your classroom class, you are going to have an array of students. Add a method over here which says add student to classroom, and you're going to create a new object and add it over here. Okay, in your main, you are going to create a classroom object, import the classroom, create the classroom object, and then add a student and just print it out. Okay, similar to this one, movie and cast, this time you have classroom and students. All right, start with the student class first, create the student class with those four properties, and then create the classroom class, and then create the main.js. So create the student class with three properties, name, subject, and GPA. And then let's see what the readme says. For the classroom, you're going to have professor name, room number, and an array of students. So this is going to be kind of similar to your student class. It does what? Yeah, right. So that's why you cannot have two.
So, I assume
Okay. Yeah, you can do.
only because I was like, oh, I saw this. I tried to do this here.
Oh,
Because so you can just do this and it signs. But it signs the variables the same.
yeah. Okay.
But it doesn't do that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So this is just a regular function.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, it can same result. But interesting, it actually lets you do both. Even though this is the only one.
Really? It doesn't use any other?
No, I don't do it.
This is the. No, it's calling the same control.
But this one does both.
So what does Bob that print do? You should print. Oh, yeah. I said yeah.
So I put in that I put create.
Oh, okay.
And this is inside the
Right.
class.
Well, if you go to the main, you're importing it twice too. That's what it's doing. So you see, you had to do it twice too.
Right. But
That's weird.
it's interesting. This one
Yeah.
comes up with this rather than inside
Oh, okay.
that. I mean, I don't know. It's just
Yeah, it's just
weird.
yeah, it's all messed up. It doesn't know what to import. Yeah. So that's why you will just have like one export and then parentheses so that it's going to be an object. See, that's the problem. Even JavaScript doesn't even tell you that, oh, this is an error. It just tries to process as best as it can, and that's why it's going to do that. All right, we have around like 7 minutes left. Any questions on this activity? I'll post the solution, but it's very similar to how I solved it. So I have a cast in a movie. It's student and classroom basically. Any questions on that? Any particular function or something that you want to see? Okay, so this is the last activity that I have. On Thursday, we'll be continuing on, that will be the last day for constructors and all that stuff. We'll be creating almost a mini project on Thursday. All right, we'll be doing it in groups. That project will include everything from day one of Node.js. We'll be using Axios, so we'll be creating classes, constructors, multiple classes, and then using Inquirer, getting all the input and everything. Okay? All right, that's all from my side. Let me know if any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on Thursday.